Have you ever wondered why some people weather life's greatest storms with an inexplicable peace? Why, while others crumble at the first difficulties, there are those who remain firm as unshakable rocks? What do they know that you haven't yet discovered? There is an ancient secret, a supernatural protection that few truly know. An invisible shield that can transform your life from fear to faith, from anxiety to absolute trust. Today, you will discover the transformative power of Psalm 91, the most powerful prayer of protection ever written. Are you ready to discover how to live under the protection of the Almighty? Get ready, because your life will never be the same again. Verse 1. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High will abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Imagine a secret retreat deep in the mountains, a place where no storm can reach, where the noise of the world becomes a distant whisper. This is exactly what it means to dwell in the shelter of the Most High. It's not a physical place, but a spiritual state of profound intimacy with God. When you choose to make the divine presence your permanent home, something supernatural happens. You cease to be just an occasional visitor to the heavenly realm and become a permanent resident of divine protection. It's like having VIP access behind the scenes of the universe, where God himself becomes your personal guardian. Think of David, who even while persecuted by Saul, found peace playing his harp in the caves, because he had learned that his true security lay not in the stone walls, but in the presence of the Most High. Your daily life can transform when you understand that no matter where you are, in chaotic traffic, in a toxic work environment, or facing family problems, you carry within you the safest secret hiding place in the universe. It's a conscious decision you make each morning, choosing to dwell in God's presence rather than in anxiety. When you make this choice, even the most daunting problems lose their power to shake you, because you have discovered where to find true rest. In the shadow of the Almighty is not just a poetic expression, it is a spiritual reality that completely transforms your life experience. Just as a leafy tree offers relief from the scorching sun, God's shade offers refreshment to your weary soul and protection from life's attacks. It's interesting to note that shade only exists when there is proximity to that which casts it. You cannot be distant from God and still enjoy his protective shade. Joseph of Egypt understood this profoundly. Even in prison, he remained so close to God that his life radiated the divine presence, transforming even the most hostile environment into a place of blessing. In your daily routine, this means you can face that difficult meeting, that challenging conversation, that moment of pressure, knowing you are protected by an invisible but real shade. It's like walking through life with a spiritual umbrella permanently open over your head, shielding you from the rains of negativity, destructive criticism, and spiritual attacks. The rest mentioned here is not inactivity, but the deep peace of knowing you are safe, even on the move. It's the tranquility of sleeping soundly, even when the storm rages outside, because you know you're sheltered in the safest place in the universe. Verse 2, I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. There is supernatural power in the declaration of faith that comes from your lips, especially when you affirm with absolute conviction, the Lord is my refuge. It's no coincidence that this verse begins with I will say, because your mouth has the power to decree spiritual realities upon your life. When you verbalize your trust in God, you're not just expressing a feeling. You're activating a spiritual force that moves mountains and opens impossible paths. It's like Joshua declaring, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. A declaration that set a spiritual standard for generations. In your practical life, this means that when you wake up in the morning and declare, God is my refuge today, you are establishing a spiritual covering over all the activities of your day. Every word of faith that comes from your mouth is like a brick building, an invisible fortress around you. People around you may not understand why you remain calm in situations that would leave others despairing, but you know the secret. Your mouth has become a tool of spiritual edification. When you speak of God as your refuge, you're not just sharing a belief, you're building a tangible spiritual reality. It's the difference between silent faith and declarative faith. One builds, the other just waits. To say that God is your fortress is to acknowledge that you have found something more solid than any earthly security, more reliable than a bank account, more stable than human relationships, more lasting than physical health. A biblical fortress wasn't just a defensive structure. It was a place where the entire community took refuge in times of war, where resources were shared, and where protection was guaranteed. When you declare God your fortress, you are saying that you have found the place where your soul can shelter from all of life's battles. Nehemiah understood this when rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. He knew that true protection didn't come from stones alone, but from unshakable trust in the God who had promised to guard the city. In your daily journey, this translates into a supernatural confidence that surprises even yourself. It's being able to sleep soundly even when the books don't seem to add up, because you know that your security doesn't depend on your strategies, but on the faithfulness of the one who never fails. The confidence mentioned here isn't naivete, it's certainty based on God's unchanging character. It's like a child sleeping soundly in their father's lap during a turbulent journey. They don't understand all the details of the journey, but they trust completely in the one in control. When you learn to trust in this way, your life becomes a living testimony to God's power. Verse 3, "For he shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence." The fowler's snare is one of the most powerful images to describe the invisible traps we face daily. Those situations that seem harmless on the surface but can capture and destroy our spiritual lives. Just like the bird that sees only the tasty bait and fails to notice the deadly trap, we often walk straight into snares disguised as opportunities, relationships, or even blessings. God promises deliverance, not only from obvious storms, but especially from the subtle traps that can divert us from God's purpose. Think of Joseph facing the seduction of Potiphar's wife, a golden trap that could have destroyed God's entire plan for his life. Divine deliverance often comes through supernatural discernment, that restlessness in the spirit that makes you say no to something everyone else considers a good opportunity. In everyday life, this could be divine protection, preventing you from signing that seemingly advantageous contract, from entering that seemingly perfect relationship, or from making that decision that everyone approves of, but God disapproves of. It's heavenly wisdom that allows you to see beyond appearances and recognize when something is a snare in disguise. When you walk under divine protection, even your no's become blessings, because they represent deliverance from traps you didn't even know existed. The Holy Spirit becomes your early warning system, signaling dangers before they materialize. The pernicious plague mentioned here goes far beyond physical illnesses. It represents every form of contamination that can spread rapidly and destroy not only you, but everything around you. In today's world, this can include everything from literal illnesses to emotional plagues like depression, chronic anxiety, bitterness, or addictions that spread like an infection. God promises protection from these plagues that attempt to contaminate your life, your family, and your destiny. Notice how Job, even after losing everything, did not allow bitterness to contaminate his heart. He was protected from the most dangerous plague of all, the loss of faith. Deliverance from the pernicious plague often happens preemptively. You don't even know you've been protected until much later. When you discover that others around you have been struck by situations that mysteriously passed you by. It is divine protection acting as an invisible shield, deflecting not only the obvious arrows, but also the subtle poisons that try to infiltrate your life. In practice, this means you can live with holy boldness, knowing you are protected not only from direct attacks, but also from indirect contamination. It means being able to live with negative people without being contaminated by their negativity, working in toxic environments without becoming toxic, and navigating family crises without losing your peace. When you understand this protection, you stop living defensively and begin to live with the confidence of someone who knows they carry supernatural spiritual immunity. Verse 4. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will take refuge. His truth will be your shield and buckler. The image of God as a mother bird covering her young with her own feathers is one of the most tender and powerful representations of divine protective love. Just as a mother eagle sacrifices the comfort of her own feathers to keep her young warm and safe, God uses his very essence to cover and protect us. It's not a distant or mechanical protection, but an intimate, loving, and sacrificial one. Ruth experienced this covering when she chose to remain with Naomi. She literally placed herself under the wings of the God of Israel and was protected and blessed in extraordinary ways. In your daily life, this means you are not alone in your struggles. There is a loving presence that envelops you like a divine blanket, especially in your most vulnerable moments. It's feeling the warmth of God's presence when the world around you seems cold and hostile. Beneath divine wings, you find not only protection, but also spiritual nourishment. It's where your soul is strengthened and renewed. It's like having a constant fatherly embrace, even when you're facing your loneliest battles. This divine covering doesn't make you passive. It's a loving presence that envelops you like a divine blanket, especially in your most vulnerable moments. On the contrary, it gives you the courage to fly higher, because you know that if you fall, there are wings ready to catch you. It is the security that allows you to take risks in the kingdom of God, knowing that failure will never be fatal under divine protection. God's truth as a shield and buckler represents a double protection: the large shield that covers your entire body and the small buckler that protects specific vulnerable points. This means you have protection from both life's big battles and the small daily attacks that try to hurt you. Divine truth is not just accurate information. It is a protective force that repels every lie, deception, and accusation that tries to establish itself against you. Daniel knew the power of truth as a shield. Even in the lion's den, the truth about who God was and who he was in God formed an impenetrable barrier around him. In your daily journey, this means that when you know and declare the truth about your identity in Christ, God's promises and your destiny, you create a spiritual force field that neutralizes the enemy's attacks. It means being able to face criticism, rejection, and even accusations, knowing that God's truth about you is more powerful than any human opinion. The buckler protects the specific points where you are most vulnerable. Perhaps your self-esteem, your relationships, or your financial insecurities. When you appropriate biblical truth about these areas, you make them inaccessible to evil attacks. It means living with the confidence that truth always prevails, even when you temporarily cannot see it manifested. Your life becomes a fortress built on the solid foundation of God's unchanging truth. Verse 5. You will not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day. Night terrors represent all those irrational fears that haunt us in our quiet, solitary hours, the anxieties that grow in the darkness of dawn, the worries that keep us awake, the nightmares that disturb our rest. God promises complete freedom from these fears that take advantage of our nocturnal vulnerability to torment us. It's interesting to note that many of the great decisions of faith in the Bible took place at night. It was at night that Jacob wrestled with the angel, that Paul saw the vision of the Macedonian man, that Jesus prayed in Gethsemane. The promise of not fearing night terrors isn't just about sleeping well, it's about having inner peace even in the darkest moments of the soul. In practical life, this means you can face those worry-laden moments of insomnia with supernatural confidence. It's about laying your head on the pillow and truly surrendering all the anxieties of the day to God, knowing that He watches over you while you rest. Night terrors often come disguised as legitimate concern, but when you're under the protection of the Almighty, even your most valid worries lose their power to rob you of peace. It's discovering that there's a difference between being responsible and being anxious, between preparing and worrying. When you don't fear night terrors, your mind becomes a place of rest instead of a battlefield, and even your dreams become prophetic instead of nightmares. The arrow that flies by day symbolizes all the direct, obvious, and intentional attacks that come against you when you're in full swing. Malicious criticism, open opposition, open persecution, professional sabotage. These are the attacks you can see coming, but which still have the power to hurt you if you're not protected. David faced literal arrows flying at him during battles, but he learned that divine protection was more effective than any physical armor. The promise here is that you can live without paranoia, even knowing there are people who deliberately want to harm you. In your daily reality, this translates into an extraordinary freedom to be authentic, to take biblical stands, to stand up for justice without fear of the consequences of intentional attacks. It's being able to speak the truth in love, even knowing that some will misinterpret it and even turn against you. When you don't fear the arrow that flies by day, you stop living defensively and start living with purpose. It's the difference between hiding behind protective walls and walking in the open with the confidence that the arrows can't reach you. Your life becomes a testament to courage because others observe how you stand firm even when you are clearly under attack. It's living with the mindset that attacks against you are actually opportunities for God to demonstrate His protective power through your life. Verse 6. Neither the pestilence that walks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. Adil, the plague that walks in the darkness, represents all the invisible, silent, and insidious threats that try to infiltrate your life when you're not vigilant. Addictions that begin subtly, toxic relationships that develop gradually, destructive thought patterns that slowly take hold. These are the dangers that spread in the darkness of unconsciousness when you're not paying attention to the warning signs. Samson fell victim to this kind of plague. His strength was sapped gradually, almost imperceptibly, until he realized too late that the Spirit of the Lord had withdrawn from him. God promises protection even from these threats you can't see coming. In everyday life, this means you have divine protection working 24/7, guarding you from dangers you don't even know exist. It's the hand of God steering you away from that bar you were thinking about going to, that seemingly harmless friendship that would lead you away from God, that habit that started small but could become a prison. Protection from the plague that stalks in the darkness often manifests itself through an inexplicable inner restlessness, a holy unease that causes you to change direction even when everything seems normal. This is the Holy Spirit functioning as your spiritual navigation system, alerting you to dangerous paths before you even see them. When you're under this protection, even your instinctive decisions are divinely guided. The midday slaughter represents the sudden and devastating crises that strike when we least expect them. Accidents, serious illnesses, financial losses, betrayals, unexpected deaths. These are the tragedies that happen in broad daylight, when everything seemed to be going well and you felt safe. Midday symbolizes the peak, the moment of greatest visibility and apparent security, but it is precisely when some of the greatest calamities can strike us. Job experienced this midday slaughter when, in a single day, he lost children, livestock, and property. But his faith in the Almighty sustained him even through the most devastating tragedy. The divine promise is not that tragedies will never happen around you, but that you will be supernaturally protected or sustained when they do. In your life experience, this means you can live without anticipatory anxiety, without spending your days imagining future catastrophes or trying to control every possible negative scenario. It is the peace of knowing that even if the unthinkable happens, you will not be destroyed by it. When you no longer fear the midday death, you free yourself from the prison of what-ifs and begin to live fully in the present. It's discovering that your safety doesn't depend on favorable circumstances, but on the faithfulness of the one who can transform even the greatest tragedies into springboards for powerful testimonies. Your life becomes an example of how it's possible to have hope even when everything around you seems to be falling apart. Verse 7. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This is one of the most extraordinary promises of individual protection amidst collective chaos. You can be literally surrounded by destruction and still remain untouched. It's not isolation or indifference, it's supernatural protection working so specifically that it can preserve you even when thousands around you are falling. Imagine the scenario: 1,000 people to your left, 10,000 to your right, all struck by some calamity, and you remain standing, protected by an invisible but real force. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego experienced this literally in the fiery furnace. The fire that would kill any ordinary person couldn't even singe their hair, while the soldiers who threw them into the furnace were killed by the heat. In your daily life, this can manifest in countless ways. Being the only one in the company not laid off during downsizing, remaining healthy while everyone around you falls ill, keeping the peace while everyone around you panics during a crisis. It's not luck or coincidence. It's the protective hand of God working surgically in your life. This specific protection doesn't make you insensitive to the suffering of others, but positions you as a source of hope and succor for those who are falling. It's being an oasis in the desert, a light in the darkness, a living testimony that God still distinguishes between those who trust in Him and those who don't. Your stability amidst chaos becomes a beacon of hope for others. The numbers 1,000 and 10,000 are not just statistics. They represent the overwhelming magnitude of the destructive forces that may be operating around you. Epidemics, economic crises, wars, pandemics, social collapses. Even when circumstances are so devastating that they affect multitudes, you remain under a bubble of divine protection that defies all statistical odds. It's important to note that you are not isolated from these situations. You are right in the middle of them, but supernaturally protected. Elisha and his servant experienced this protection when they woke up surrounded by the Syrian army. While the servant saw only the enemy, Elisha prayed that he would see the angelic protection surrounding them, far greater than the enemy forces. In practice, this means that you can navigate pandemics, economic crises, political instability, and even wars with a confidence that defies human logic. It means maintaining sanity when everyone around you is consumed by anxiety, preserving financial health when the economy is collapsing, sustaining healthy relationships when families are falling apart around you. This specific protection qualifies you to be a minister of comfort and hope to those who are falling. You become living proof that there is a God who is capable of making an individual difference, even in collective catastrophes. Your protected life becomes a wordless sermon on God's faithfulness and power. Verse 8, "Only with your eyes will you behold and see the reward of the wicked." There is a divine justice that works perfectly, even when our human eyes cannot immediately see it. And God promises that you will be an eyewitness to this justice being executed. It's not a promise of personal revenge, but of observing how the very nature of evil choices brings their inevitable consequences. It's seeing how those who choose paths of evil, corruption, and wickedness eventually reap exactly what they sow, without you having to lift a finger against them. Moses contemplated this when he saw the Egyptians being swallowed by the Red Sea. He didn't have to fight them. He simply observed God administering justice supernaturally. In your everyday experience, this means you can rest assured that all injustice will be corrected, all wickedness will be punished, all evil will be neutralized in God's perfect timing. It's liberating to know that you don't have to be the agent of justice. You can simply be a witness to divine justice. When someone deliberately harms you, when wicked people temporarily prosper at your expense, when lies seem to be winning over truth, you can rest assured knowing that your eyes will eventually behold the reward each will receive. This frees you from bitterness, the desire for revenge, and the anxiety of seeing justice done, because you know it is guaranteed. It is living with the certainty that the moral universe works perfectly, even when it temporarily seems out of order. Seeing the reward of the wicked is not celebrating the misfortune of others, but witnessing the victory of God's justice and the validation of your choice to live righteously. It's like watching the end of a movie where it's finally revealed who was right and who was wrong all along. You will discover that all the persecution you suffered, all the injustices you experienced, all the times you were misunderstood for choosing God's path will be completely vindicated before your very eyes. Esther contemplated this when she saw Haman being hanged on the same gallows he had prepared for Mordecai. Divine justice has a precision and irony that only God can orchestrate. In practical life, this means you can face false accusations, slander, persecution, and injustice with supernatural peace, knowing that one day your integrity will be publicly validated. It means being able to genuinely forgive those who have hurt you, not because what they did was not serious, but because you know that divine justice will take care of the matter far more effectively than any human vengeance could. When you understand this promise, you free yourself from the need to constantly defend yourself or prove your innocence to everyone. It's living with the quiet dignity of someone who knows that the truth always prevails, even if it takes time to see it happen. Your patience in awaiting divine justice becomes a powerful testimony to your level of trust in God. Verse 9, "For you, O Lord, are my refuge. You have made your dwelling in the Most High." This verse marks a fundamental shift in perspective, from observing God's protection to making a personal and definitive declaration about where you have chosen to establish your spiritual life. It is no longer God protects, but you, Lord, are my refuge, an intimate and personal confession that transforms theory into lived experience. Making the Most High your dwelling place means you don't visit God occasionally, you live in Him permanently. It's like the difference between being a tourist and a resident. Tourists know a few famous landmarks. Residents know every street, every detail, every secret of the place. John, the beloved disciple, understood this mutual indwelling when he wrote about abiding in Christ. It is not a temporary or emotional experience, but a permanent state of spiritual residence. In your daily journey, this means you carry God's presence not as extra baggage, but as your very identity. Where you go, He goes. Where you are, He is. It is awakening knowing that you dwell in God and He dwells in you, transforming even the most mundane activities into sacred experiences. Making the Most High your dwelling place completely changes your perspective on problems, challenges, and opportunities. Everything is filtered through the lens of someone who lives in the constant presence of divinity. It's having 24-hour, 7 days a week access to the throne of grace, not as a special privilege, but as your normal condition of life. Dwelling implies permanence, stability, and a sense of belonging that transcends temporary circumstances. You have found your true spiritual home in the heart of God Himself. No matter how many times you need to move physically, how many changes occur in your external life, you always have a fixed spiritual address in the Most High. Abraham experienced this reality when he left Ur of the Chaldees. Though physically a pilgrim, spiritually he had found his true homeland in God. Making this dwelling a conscious reality means you develop an intimacy with God that becomes more real than any human relationship. It is knowing the thoughts of God's heart, understanding His ways, discerning His voice with crystal clarity. In practical life, this manifests as an unshakable peace that is independent of geography, relationships, or external circumstances. It is feeling at home anywhere in the world because you carry within you your own heavenly home. When you truly dwell in the Most High, even physical solitude becomes sweet divine communion, and even crowds cannot disturb your inner peace. Your life becomes a mobile sanctuary, a living temple where God's presence manifests tangibly to everyone around you. It's living with the dignity of those who know they carry within themselves the dwelling place of the King of Kings. Verse 10. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your tent. The promise that no evil will befall you does not mean the absence of challenges or difficulties, but the assurance that nothing truly destructive will be able to take a permanent place in your life. It's the difference between weathering a storm and being destroyed by it. You can get wet, but you won't be swept away by the flood. Evil here refers specifically to that which has the power to corrupt, contaminate, or destroy your destiny and divine purpose. Joseph faced unjust imprisonment, but evil could not befall him because God transformed every apparent tragedy into a stepping stone to the palace. In your everyday experience, this means that you may face loss, disappointment, betrayal, and even tragedy. But none of these will have the power to destroy who you are in God or divert you from your divine calling. It's the promise that even the most painful experiences will be filtered through God's love and sovereignty before they reach you. When something bad happens in your life, you can be sure that it has passed through the divine sieve and that in some mysterious way it will serve your good. It's living with the confidence that you are indestructible in the spiritual realm, even when you seem vulnerable in the natural realm. Your life becomes a testament to how God can transform even the most negative experiences into victories, demonstrating that evil never has the final word over those who dwell in the Most High. Your tent represents your personal space, your family, your intimacy, what is most precious and close to your heart. And God promises that no plague will be able to contaminate these sacred spaces in your life. A plague is something that spreads quickly and destroys everything within its reach. But the promise is that your spiritual and physical home will be protected from this contamination. Noah experienced this protection when the ark became the only place in the entire world protected from the flood. While the entire earth was contaminated by judgment, his tent remained an oasis of life and hope. In practical terms, this means that your home can be a haven of peace. Even when the world around you is in chaos, your family relationships can remain healthy even when other families are falling apart. Your mind can be at peace even when everyone around you is in panic. It is divine protection, creating a bubble of holiness around what you love most. When emotional, spiritual, or even physical plagues try to invade your sacred space, they encounter an invisible but impenetrable barrier. It's being able to create an environment where God's presence is so real that negativity simply can't take hold. Your tent becomes a piece of heaven on earth, a place where others can come for refuge and renewal. It's living with the certainty that God is the guardian of your intimacy and that nothing impure can contaminate what He has chosen to protect. Verse 11, "For He shall give His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways." The revelation that God personally commissions His angels to guard you is one of the most extraordinary truths about the spiritual reality surrounding your daily life. These are not random angels doing you an occasional favor. They are angels who have received specific orders from God Himself with detailed instructions on how to protect you. It's like having a heavenly security detail working 24/7 exclusively for your protection, following protocols established by the Supreme Commander of the universe. Elisha revealed this reality to his servant when he prayed for his eyes to be opened. Suddenly, the young man could see that they were surrounded by horses and chariots of fire, an angelic escort far superior to the enemy forces. In your daily journey, this means that you are never truly alone or unprotected, even when you feel isolated or vulnerable. There is constant angelic activity all around you. Angels diverting accidents, influencing decisions of people who could harm you, opening doors that seemed impossible, closing paths that would lead to destruction. It's comforting to know that when you leave home in the morning, you are not navigating the world with your own abilities alone. There's an invisible but real escort accompanying every step. This angelic protection doesn't make you irresponsible, but it gives you the courage to walk in God's purposes even when they seem risky to human eyes. The phrase, "in all your ways," is absolutely inclusive. There is no place you can go, no situation you can face, no decision you can make where angelic protection is not active. Whether you are walking in the obvious paths of God's will or exploring new and uncertain territories, angelic coverage is constant and all-encompassing. Peter experienced this dramatically when he was freed from prison by an angel. Even in a seemingly impossible situation, God's command for his protection was executed with military precision. In practical life, this means you can explore new opportunities, accept challenges beyond your comfort zone, and even make honest mistakes, knowing that angelic protection is active regardless of the perfection of your choices. It is liberating to know that angels are not only watching over you when you are being good, but in all your ways, including those moments of weakness, doubt, or imperfection. This constant protection allows you to live with holy boldness, knowing that even if you stumble, there are angels ready to sustain you. It's the difference between living trying to avoid all risks and living trusting in divine protection as you seek to fulfill your purpose. Your life becomes an adventure of faith because you know you have heavenly backup in every situation. It's walking through life with the attitude of someone who knows they have influence in the spiritual world, constantly working in their favor. Verse 12, "They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone." The image of angels holding you in their hands reveals the level of personal and intimate care that characterizes heavenly protection. Not a distant or mechanical protection, but loving, like hands supporting a child learning to walk. Angelic hands are constantly positioned to support you, especially in moments when your own balance is compromised. It's like having a spiritual airbag system that automatically activates whenever you're about to fall. Jesus was held by angels after his 40-day fast in the desert. When he was at his most physically vulnerable, heavenly provision manifested itself through angelic ministry. In your daily experience, this translates into those inexplicable moments where you should have fallen but didn't, where you should have been hurt but were unharmed, where you should have failed but somehow remained standing. It's the angelic hand sustaining you when you're going through moments of emotional, spiritual, or physical weakness. Often, you don't even realize you were held until you look back and recognize that, humanly speaking, it was impossible to have gotten through certain situations without completely collapsing. This angelic support allows you to walk in territories that would normally require far more experience, wisdom, or strength than you naturally possess. It's like having a pair of invisible but strong hands, always ready to steady you when the ground gets shaky. Your confidence to face challenges increases exponentially when you understand that you're not walking on your own 2 feet. Taking special care not to trip over a stone demonstrates attention to the seemingly small but potentially dangerous details of the journey. The everyday obstacles, the pebbles in the path that can cause devastating falls if not avoided. It's not just the big mountains that need to be removed, it's also the small stones that can trip you up in the middle of a successful journey. David wrote of God preparing a table in the presence of enemies. This includes removing even the smallest obstacles that could hinder your fellowship and progress. In everyday life, this represents divine protection at work in the details. That conversation that could have led to a misunderstanding, but someone intervened at the right time. That email you were about to send at the wrong moment, but something made you wait. That impulsive decision that could have damaged a relationship, but you felt an inexplicable inner break. The angels are constantly removing the small obstacles from your path that you don't even realize exist. It's preventative protection, working to keep small problems from turning into major crises. When you walk under this angelic protection, even your near misses become testaments to God's faithfulness. It's living with the awareness that there's a heavenly attention watching over even the most trivial aspects of your journey, because for God, no detail of your life is too insignificant to deserve angelic protection. Verse 13, you will tread upon the lion and the cobra, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. The promise to tread on the lion and the cobra reveals that you will not only be protected from threats, but also given supernatural authority to dominate and defeat even the most ferocious and venomous enemies. The lion represents brute force, open aggression, and direct attacks that try to intimidate you and make you retreat. The cobra symbolizes subtle poison, the insidious attacks that try to slowly poison you through criticism, gossip, or evil influences. God is promising that you will have authority over both types of attacks. Jesus demonstrated this authority when he trampled on scorpions and serpents, empowering his disciples to do the same, not as a spectacle, but as a demonstration of spiritual mastery over the forces of darkness. In your daily reality, this means you can face intimidating people, threatening situations, and hostile environments with an authority that does not come from you, but operates through you. It means having the courage to confront injustice, resist pressure to compromise your values, and even rebuke evil activities when necessary. Trampling these enemies is not an act of arrogance, but the exercise of the authority God has delegated to you as his representative on earth. It's discovering that you have far more spiritual power than you imagined, and that you can use this power to protect not only yourself, but also others who are being attacked by these same enemies. Trampling the young lion and the serpent represents dominion over the next generation of threats. You not only overcome current attacks, but also neutralize future generations of problems that could develop. The young lion symbolizes threats that are growing and developing. The serpent represents evil wisdom, the cunning that tries to deceive you through seductive arguments and destructive philosophies. Daniel exercised this authority when he interpreted dreams and resisted the pressures of Babylonian culture. He not only survived current attacks, but influenced future generations through his faithfulness. In practical life, this means that your victory over present temptations breaks vicious cycles that could affect your family for generations. When you trample the serpent of lies, you protect your children from being deceived by the same lies. When you trample the young lion of intimidation, you are teaching the next generation that it is possible to live without fear. It is exercising prophetic authority that affects not only the present, but the future. Your spiritual victory today is creating a legacy of victory for those who come after you. It's living with the awareness that your battles are not just personal, but have generational implications. When you walk in the authority of Psalm 91, you become a breaker of curses and a creator of blessings for future generations. Verse 14. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. Now it is God himself speaking directly, revealing that all this extraordinary protection has a fundamental basis: love. It is not a superficial or emotional love, but a deep, committed, and transformative love that moves God's heart to act supernaturally on your behalf. He so greatly loved me indicates a level of love that goes beyond casual devotion. It is the love that chooses God above all other options, that prioritizes God's will above one's own desires, that persists even when the path becomes difficult. Mary of Bethany demonstrated this great love when she anointed Jesus with expensive perfume, being criticized by others but approved by Christ himself. God is saying that this kind of love does not go unnoticed in heaven and generates a proportional response of protection and deliverance. On your spiritual journey, this means that the more deeply you love God, the more intensely He moves on your behalf. It is not a commercial transaction, but a natural response of God's fatherly heart upon seeing the genuine love of His children. When you love God greatly, you qualify for supernatural experiences of deliverance that go beyond normal protection. It's discovering that your love for God is not just a personal emotion, but a force that activates specific heavenly responses. Great love for God becomes the key that unlocks doors of miracles, impossible provisions, and extraordinary deliverances in your life. Being placed in high retreat is a military image that means being placed in a strategically elevated position, out of reach of enemies and with a panoramic view of the battlefield. It's not isolation or escapism, but spiritual elevation that gives you a divine perspective on life's situations. Knowing God's name goes far beyond knowing information about Him. It's an experiential intimacy that allows you to access different aspects of God's character as needed. Abraham knew God as Jehovah-Jireh, the God who provides. From his own experience on Mount Moriah, Moses knew Him as Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner, after his victory over the Amalekites. In everyday life, this means developing an intimate knowledge of God's different names and characteristics through real-life experiences. When you truly know God's name, you know exactly which aspect of His character to invoke in each specific situation. It's having direct access to God's infinite resources because you've learned the language of divine intimacy. High retreat doesn't remove you from battles, it gives you a strategic advantage. It's living with the perspective of someone who sees situations from God's perspective, understanding purposes that others cannot see. When you know God's name intimately, your life becomes a practical demonstration of the different aspects of God's character to everyone around you. Verse 15, "He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him out of it, and will glorify him." The divine guarantee of an answer to your invocation establishes a direct line of communication between you and the heavenly throne. It's not a possibility, but an absolute certainty based on the loving relationship that has been established. When you invoke God's name, there are no heavenly secretaries, messaging systems, or waiting lines. There is an immediate response from God himself. It's like having the personal phone number of the President of the universe, guaranteed to always be answered on the first call. Elijah experienced this reality when he prayed on Mount Carmel. His invocation was immediately answered with fire from heaven, demonstrating that God is always available to those who truly love him. The promise, "I will be with him in trouble," reveals that God not only observes your difficulties from afar, but chooses to be present in the midst of them with you. In your daily experience, this means that you can face any crisis, any moment of pain, any period of uncertainty, knowing that you are not alone. There is a real divine presence sharing the weight of the situation with you. It's discovering that anguish can become a place of intimate encounter with God, where his presence becomes more real and tangible than at any other time. When you call upon God in the midst of anguish, you're not just asking for deliverance. You're inviting God himself to share your human experience. It's transforming moments of greatest vulnerability into opportunities for greater divine intimacy. The promised deliverance here is accompanied by glorification. God not only solves your problems, but uses your victories to demonstrate his glory so that others can witness his power. It is a divine promotion that comes as a direct result of your intimate relationship with God and your faithfulness during tribulations. Joseph was glorified after his deliverance from prison, becoming governor of Egypt. Daniel was exalted after each deliverance, being promoted in the Babylonian kingdom. Glorification is not personal boasting, but divine elevation that positions you as a witness to God's power. In practical life, this means that your greatest difficulties will become your greatest qualifications. Your deepest wounds will transform into sources of more powerful ministry, and your personal victories will become public testimonies of God's faithfulness. It is discovering that God does not waste even your most painful experiences. He transforms them into platforms to demonstrate his glory. When you experience deliverance and glorification, your life becomes a living sermon on God's power that inspires faith in others facing similar situations. It's living with the expectation that your testimonies today will become the tools God uses to encourage others tomorrow. Your glorification is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a broader ministry of demonstrating God's faithfulness through your own experience. Verse 16, "I will satisfy him with long life and show him my salvation." The promise of being filled with longevity goes far beyond simply living many years. It's about having a full, satisfying, and purposeful life that leaves you truly satisfied at the end. It's not just the number of days, but the quality of life that makes each day worthwhile. Moses, at 120, still had clear eyes and physical vigor because he had been filled with true longevity, a life rich in purpose, a relationship with God, and meaningful impact. Being filled means that when your earthly life comes to an end, you will have no regrets or feelings of wasted life. You will be completely satisfied with everything you have lived and accomplished. In your current experience, this means that each phase of life will be maximized in purpose and satisfaction, that you will not only survive the years, but will live them intensely. It's discovering that true longevity includes mental, emotional, and spiritual health that remains vibrant regardless of chronological age. When you embrace this promise, you can plan long-term projects, establish lasting relationships, and invest in legacies that transcend your own existence, knowing you will have the time and energy to see the fruits mature. It's living each day intensely, without desperate haste, because you know there's plenty of time to fulfill all of God's purposes for your life. Your longevity becomes a blessing not only for you, but for all who will benefit from your wisdom, experience, and prolonged contribution to the world. Seeing God's salvation is the ultimate climax of this entire journey of protection and blessing. It is personally witnessing how all of God's plans unfold perfectly, how every promise is fulfilled, and how every apparent contradiction is resolved in sublime harmony. Simeon experienced this when he held the baby Jesus in the temple and declared, "Now my eyes have seen your salvation." He had waited his entire life to see the fulfillment of God's promises and was completely satisfied. Seeing God's salvation means you will live long enough to witness how God resolves every pending situation, how every prayer is answered, even if not in the expected way, and how every injustice is righted in the perfection of divine timing. In your life's journey, this represents the promise that you will not die doubting God's faithfulness. You will see clearly how He has been working in every situation, even those that seem to contradict His promises. It is the assurance that your story will have a happy ending that will validate all your faith and trust in God. When you see God's salvation, you understand in retrospect how every detail of your life contributed to a purpose greater and more beautiful than you could have imagined. It's leaving this life with the complete satisfaction of someone who has personally witnessed that God is truly who He says He is and truly does what He promises to do. Your life becomes a complete testimony of God's salvation that will inspire future generations to trust Him in the same way. Now you know the secret that transforms ordinary lives into extraordinary existences. Psalm 91 is not just an ancient text. It is a contract of divine protection available to those who choose to make the Most High their refuge. The question remains, will you live like someone who knows these secrets, or will you continue to face life with only your own strength? Your decision today will determine whether you will be just another person being dominated by circumstances or become someone who masters the storms of life through the supernatural power of God. The divine shield is available, angelic protection is active, the promise of longevity and glorification awaits you. Make your choice. Your transformed life begins now. Share this video with someone who needs to know the protective power of Psalm 91. Leave a comment with the verse that most impacted your life, and subscribe to receive more revelations that will transform your spiritual journey.